The next talk we have is from the amazing Mark Adams, who's VP of Innovation at Vice. Always does a great talk at any event he's at. And Mark, I think we're going to go straight to you now.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I have too many slides. I'm just going to go through it as fast as I can. But here's the thing, add me on LinkedIn and I'll send you the deck because it's longer than I'm ever going to get through. So really, really quickly, I'm not saying this for some kind of like bragging thing. I'm trying to set up why I'm saying this to you right now. Everything I'm about to tell you, I don't want you to think, oh, that sounds nice. I want you to know that this is big B business, right? So last year, 2020, we won 18 Emmys, we won 25 Cannes Lions, we won 3 Peabodys, we were the production company of the year, we won Sundance, we won Venice, we won a lot of shit, right? We won BAFTAs, we got an Oscar nomination. Now, how do you do that and achieve multi-billion-dollar status? Well, I'll tell you the story of how we learned to turn our company around from an absolute disaster to the situation that we're in now. And basically, it comes down to this. How do you define your audience? And essentially what we did was we stopped talking about audiences. Now, this is going to sound really controversial because we're a publisher and publishers talk about audiences all day long. And maybe to our clients, we talk about audiences, but internally we talk about communities. And I'm going to show you why. If I asked you, where do you spend your time? Where do you spend your money? Where do you consume content and what kind of content do you consume? I'd get a pretty good picture of who you actually are as a person. Secondarily, that data, a lot of it is GDPR compliant because it's at the cohort level, as Elizabeth said earlier on. So if I'm a cyclist or a failed DJ, as everyone from Essex is, knowing that about me is really, really important for your experience and relationship management of me as a potential customer. So what we realized was we did this huge piece of research about 6 years ago, and it basically told us that every single room that you're in is a cluster of these community networks, right? Like if I say, where are my great Game of Thrones people or my cyclists or my electronic music fans, you guys will be like, yeah, that's me. No, I'm not into it. But the world is this. And guess what the internet is? The internet is basically that on steroids. It's an interconnected set of community networks. So we started realizing we'd been putting a lot of effort into the wrong things. We commissioned a study across all of our audience, and our audience just completely backed us up and said, oh shit, all the things that brands brief us on, that we even make content based on back then, occupation, gender, sexual identity, economic status, age, ethnicity, race, i.e. all the stuff that's in that brief that you've just given your agency, all of it doesn't at all scratch the surface of the personality or the identity of the communities that are out there in the world. They define themselves by hobbies and passions, values and personality. So suddenly we went, right, what do we do with this information? We started thinking about it a bit more. We were like, well, these guys are the same age. They're both ultra high net worth individuals. They live actually in New York, or they have done in New York. So you start realizing, like, if these people are demographically equal, you can already see the absurdity, right? Gen Z includes both of these people. On the right-hand side, you've got Little Pump, who's just been arrested this week for drug charges. And on the left-hand side, you have Prince George, who is the future monarch. And you're trying to tell me that both of these people are in the same category and we should define them in the same space, but say that one person who's 1 year older or 1 year younger than these people isn't in that category. You see how quickly this becomes absurd. And then finally, we started realizing no wonder it was so hard to cut through with our content, because these two guys are both princes. One of them is the Prince of Darkness, and the other one is the Prince of Wales. They both live in Windsor, just outside the UK. They're both the same age. They both have the same number of kids, and they both have the same number of dogs. So what you're telling me is no wonder it's difficult to win, right? So I want to ask you, brands and agencies now, do you think that part of the reason why it's so hard and you're so exhausted all the time might be because you're committing the original sin of all bad work, which is demographic segmentation? And I'm not saying you shouldn't have demographic segmentation. Of course, you layer it in at some point. It's like Tinder. You don't want to choose people who are 75 years old if you're 20, but it's not the whole thing, right? There's more to it. So what we started to realize was that companies that maintain and create growth now in this century, they're doing this, right? They understand the power of community. So, you know, the previous generation of companies are not having a very good time. They're dropping out of the S&P 500 like flies. The average life cycle has gone from 75 years in the S&P 500 to 15. I think post-COVID, it's going to go down to more like 5. All these insurgent brands are taking market share. Nobody knows how to explain it. I can honestly tell you, when I read the briefs and I see all the briefs from all the companies, I can tell you what the key issue is. You don't understand the people you're trying to target and recruit from and grow market share from. You've bought too much into the top of the funnel, light buyer, Byron Sharp thing, and you've forgotten there's a whole other science that you don't understand. And so we started to double down on this. We started thinking, well, look at all these new brands that are coming through. When they brief us, they talk about these communities. They don't just say just communities. So this is the most important thing. They have a community that they're trying to activate, which is their base, but they also have a mass reach audience, which does with the Byron Sharp, high reach, high frequency, top of the funnel stuff. They have both. It's not one or the other. So the first question I always get is, well, does communities mean we're not supposed to do high reach mass media? It's like, no, you have a community, you activate them, they become your advocates, your loyalists, et cetera, et cetera. And then you also tell stories with them, build equity with them, build purpose and contribution with them, and blow that out as a story to everyone else in the world. And that's your secondary audience. But if you look at the companies that are still winning, they still have this. If you get a brief from Apple, it will talk about the creative class. It will talk about that. It won't just say high reach and frequency, right? It won't just say, give us cheap and dirty reach. And so I'm fortunate enough to be an advisor for this company. And Ben, who's the founder, says we're a community that just happens to sell things. Now they're a $1.5 billion brand now. So this is what I said before, this is hardcore business. And actually interesting, the Hut Group IPO'd earlier last year, 4.7 billion. And Matthew Modine, the CEO, saying, if you really look, you realize that D2C brands are not direct to consumer, they're direct to community. And so the second reason why we started to delve into this is communities help you predict and prepare for the future. So we track communities using a partner called Codec.ai, and we were tracking about 400 of these communities around the world. But what they show us is when a community is growing, you can see that that's going to be it's going to cross the chasm into mainstream culture, as everything eventually does if it gains enough momentum. So what you realize is community intelligence is essentially a tsunami early warning detection service. It's like the thing that's about to hit you. It's very easy to see it if you're so inclined to get out of the boardroom, stop working with the ancient partners from the 20th century and start thinking in the new ways. And you can actually detect these things and actually start to win. So it's a little bit like Alien, my favorite film of all time. At the beginning, the alien isn't too much to worry about, right? It's just this little thing. It's like, oh yeah, it's obviously, it's not nice, but it's not too big. By the end of the film, it's pretty fucking big. So here's the thing. It's the same thing with market share. Brands go, I remember sitting with ABI 10 years ago saying to them, craft beer, the craft beer community is getting bigger. You need to pay attention. Oh yeah, thanks very much. We've got our agency. Thanks guys. Thanks very much, Vice. Yeah, little Vice. I hate to say it, we're now a multi-billion-dollar business. And that agency, we could probably buy them with the spare pocket money we have. And the irony is that now the brand has to M&A their way out of a problem they could have very easily leaned into if they'd been so inclined to think that way. Same thing with this girl when we made a documentary and went to all the big FMCG companies and said, hey guys, anyone want to support this? She's actually looking for funding. No one was interested because nobody could see the future. They could just see the past and the present. Again, with this one, we were like, hey guys, this is going to be a big thing. Everyone was like, yeah, thanks very much, Vice. Yeah, thank you so much. And when we started to do the virtual agency, did the rebrand for Urban Decay, we said, there's this lady and there's this movement called body positivity. You really need to know about this. We said to the L'Oréal executives, and to be fair, they listened. They've got a great chief digital officer who said, yeah, we need to listen to this, Lubomira. And 4 months after the campaign came out, which was 18 months after the strategy was built, where we suggested this, she was Times Entertainer of the Year. So my question is it luck? That was my first slide was, are we the luckiest company in the world? Or is it that the more we practice community tracking and identification and activation, the luckier we seem to get? So I'm just going to finish with this. Demographics are not just unhelpful, they're also unfair. This is the final thing. Slowly, the industry is waking up to this. These are all perfectly good demographic statements. I could say young people are selfish. I hear this all the time. French people are rude. Essex people are all failed DJs. I'm from Essex. I'm a failed DJ. The only statement on that list is true is that one, because that is actually true. The rest of them are not true. And I would say bad intellectual thought comes from demographic segmentation and demographic strategy setting, but also really bad moral and ethical things come out of this. And we have to take some kind of responsibility. And I honestly think this is a brand safety issue now, because the consumer's waking up to the idea that most of the tropes and the prejudices that were set in the minds of mass consumers were placed there by brands and their agencies who didn't have any regard for the nuance of culture and how it breaks down into those interconnected communities that I've spoken about. And so therefore they defined women being in the home and being in the kitchen and men being at barbecues. And that's where we are. And it's partly our own responsibility. And it's now a brand safety issue to solve that. And so you see people like Unilever and P&G joining the Unstereotype Alliance. And I think the momentum behind this is going to grow and grow. That's all I got. I hope that's useful. And any questions, hit me up. But I just wanted to add as much value as possible.
Mark, that was superb. I think the last time I saw you was when you were in the woods at Summer Midnight in Sweden or Light 9 Festival. So similarly as inventive now. I love the presentation. The question from me, what I really enjoyed is you going through the brands that sort of turned your insights down. And then L'Oreal said, yes, so what's the common thread? Is it people? Is it organisations? And how can organisations and people change to be the ones that say yes?
It's a brilliant question. I fundamentally believe that there are now more than ever two paradigms of marketing. One of them is people still believing that you can have a retargeting relationship and build a consumer group and grow market share. I'm sure Elizabeth said it so perfectly. If it hasn't occurred to you yet that a retargeting relationship isn't going to go anywhere for you anymore, you really need to get into a new industry. It's time to build real relationships with consumers based on the way they define themselves, not the way that Kantar defined them or the boardroom defines them. And it's time to realize that that's the only way that you're going to create mutual value exchange and get that first party data, which is going to be the thing that every single person is going to be obsessing about for the next 5 years, because the privacy at first future that we're obviously now in is going to neglect and constantly make our options on third-party data smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until first-party data will be like gold. And so if you're committed to creating services and experiences and mutual value exchange, you're like L'Oreal. You know that that's the future. If you're committed to blast paid media at an efficient reach and frequency to keep ideas salient and top of mind, you're fucked. So that's my honest answer to that question.
Good answer. Nice and blunt. Okay, so the question here from Sylvia. Sylvia, how do you get a multinational media company to change its commercial mindset? What proof do you need to convince the powers that be?
Brilliant question, Sylvia. And I sense your frustration because I feel like all digitally minded people, probably all the people listening here, we should all just have a therapy session once a month, which is probably what this is. So I totally hear your frustration there. So what we did is, like everything, it's all about exporting excellence, right? You start small, you do a couple of things. Like we did a Virtue, our creative agency, did the repositioning of Lululemon. It was the first time that Lululemon had a global creative, agency, and we built a platform called This Is Yoga. And it was unbelievably successful. Like Lululemon's stock price actually shifted, and it was an unbelievable, kind of Harvard business case study. And that really helped us realize, and frankly, there was a change of ownership and a change of leadership at the top of our organization. And Nancy, our CEO, came in. Nancy had built things like Duck Dynasty and Ice Road Truckers in A&E networks where she'd worked before. So it meant it was music to her ears to hear that, guess what, there is a world outside of the world of, London, LA, New York, So suddenly you realize, and so now we talk about this idea that the first thing that the boardroom needs to do is be cool. And what do we mean by be cool? We mean be conscious of other life. And why? Because that other life, those other communities that you don't know about, they might not be the same ones as you. They might not be the foodies living in upper middle class communities in London, but they might be into fucking wrestling, right? They might be into all these things that you turn your nose at dinner parties. But guess what? They might give you the market share that you would never turn your nose up at. So we started to realize the long tail, the eventual inevitable end of connecting everyone together on a thing called the internet would be an interconnected set of community networks. And that long tail is very, 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 very long. And it's replacing the mainstream. There is no mainstream anymore. So once you realize that, you start realizing we've got no choice. Slowly but surely, I think the answer is on that one, Sylvia. And I'm happy to help you with anything I can send over.
Mark, amazing. That's a superb presentation as usual, and a great therapy session. So hopefully see you again very soon. Thank you very much.